he made his own daughter pregnant twice before she turned 15. This is the story of Willard Dawson, the most incestuous father ever exposed in the state of Georgia, a case that shocked the small community of Rabun Gap in the 1970s. An Appalachian mountain family, isolated, where dark secrets remained buried for generations until an inevitable collapse revealed a reality many would have preferred never to know. Rabun Gap, Georgia, 1978, a mountainous region where time seemed to move slower than in the rest of the country. Isolated communities here maintained their own traditions, protected by deep valleys and precarious roads that kept outsiders away. In this setting, the Dawson family built their own reality, far from external eyes and the laws of conventional society. Willard Dawson, 42 years old in 1978, descended from one of the first families to settle that region in the early 19th century. His ancestors had arrived as pioneers, claiming the high land where they built a small farm. Over generations, the Dawsons became known for their isolation and distrust of strangers, rarely coming to town except for essential supplies. Their property sat about 12 kilometers from the nearest town, at the end of a dirt road that turned impassable during heavy rains. The main house, a two-story wooden structure built by Willard's grandfather, was visibly deteriorated. A partially collapsed barn, a water well, and a few cultivated areas completed the property where Willard lived with his wife Martha and their 5 children. Martha Dawson, born Martha Collins, was Willard's second-degree cousin. The two had married when she was only 16, following a long-standing family pattern of unions between relatives. Martha's demeanor was withdrawn, her eyes perpetually downcast, and she rarely spoke around strangers. At 38, she appeared much older, a result of deprivation and the physical and emotional toll of multiple pregnancies in precarious conditions. The couple had 5 children, 3 boys, Jacob, 19, Thomas, 17, and Samuel, 10, and 2 girls, Sarah, 15, and Rebecca, 8, all shared similar physical traits, shorter stature, asymmetrical features, and noticeable dental problems. Jacob and Thomas already displayed erratic behavior, swinging between periods of apathy and unexplained aggressive outbursts. The story began to surface when 15-year-old Sarah Dawson was taken to the regional hospital after fainting during a rare trip to town with her father. What doctors discovered that day would open the door to an investigation revealing decades of a practice modern society considers one of the greatest taboos: improper relationships within the same family, resulting in children with severe developmental issues. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. If not, subscribe now so you don't miss impactful stories that uncover the darkest secrets of American families. These are truths few have the courage to tell, but they must be known so they are never repeated. Dr. Richard Thornton still remembers clearly the day Sarah Dawson arrived at Clayton Community Hospital. It was a cold October morning in 1978, and the unconscious teenager was carried into the emergency room by her father. Willard Dawson explained his daughter had fainted while carrying groceries and that it wasn't the first time recently. "There was something about his behavior that bothered me from the start," Dr. Thornton recalled years later. How he avoided eye contact, how he insisted on staying beside her, how nervous he seemed when we suggested more detailed tests. The initial exam showed Sarah was severely anemic and dehydrated, but a more complete assessment revealed the truth: the teenager was pregnant, roughly 5 months along. Confronted with this, Willard became visibly agitated, insisting on taking his daughter home immediately. At that critical moment, nurse Elaine Parker, with over 20 years of experience in sensitive cases, intervened. Sensing possible vulnerability, she created a private moment with Sarah while Willard was sent to fill out forms. "When we were finally alone, I asked her about the pregnancy," Elaine later reported. "She looked at me with the emptiest eyes I've ever seen and simply whispered, 'Dad says it's like this for all the girls in our family.'" That quiet confession was the first glimpse of the horror on the Dawson property. Recognizing the severity, the medical team immediately contacted local authorities. Sheriff David Miller arrived within the hour. Willard was detained for questioning while Sarah remained under observation. Authorities obtained a search warrant for the Dawson property, where they found Martha and the other 4 children. The house revealed alarming conditions. Though there was electricity from a diesel generator, there was no running water or proper sewage. Rooms were sparsely furnished, with mattresses on the floor in some. The pantry held little food aside from canned goods and garden vegetables. Most disturbing was the discovery of a 2-year-old girl hidden in a back room. The child, unrecorded in any official documents, had worrying physical characteristics, a head disproportionate to her body, wide-set eyes, and severe difficulties with movement and communication. Martha Dawson, through tears, revealed this was Emma, Sarah's daughter. She confirmed Emma's father was Willard. Preliminary investigation showed Sarah had given birth to Emma at just 13. The child had never been registered, seen a doctor, or known to any authority. Now, Sarah was pregnant again, also by her father. As the investigation deepened, a more disturbing picture emerged. School records showed Sarah had attended only until age 10, when Willard claimed he would homeschool her, something that never happened. The 3 boys had also left school early, and the youngest, Rebecca, had never been enrolled. Neighbors from distant properties reported rarely seeing the Dawsons. They came to town maybe 3 or 4 times a year, always with just 1 or 2 children, never the whole family, a local merchant recalled. If you tried to make conversation, Willard cut it short and left. The investigation also revealed the family survived mainly from selling animal pelts they hunted and subsistence farming. Old documents showed the Dawsons had received a significant inheritance in the early 1960s, explaining how they maintained the property. But a darker pattern was emerging, consanguinity stretched back at least 3 generations. County records indicated Willard's grandparents were first-degree cousins, as were his parents. This closed genetic lineage had resulted in mounting physical and cognitive problems with each new generation. As Sarah regained strength in the hospital, her story took shape through conversations with caseworker Eleanor Winters. With patience, Eleanor gradually gained the teenager's trust. "The world outside is dangerous and full of people who want to separate us," Sarah repeated, echoing a lifetime of teaching. "Dad always said only within our family could we be truly safe." The reality that emerged was chilling. Sarah explained that when she turned 12, her father began treating her differently. He told her it was family tradition for fathers to teach daughters about adult life. Martha, her mother, had been quietly complicit, having experienced the same with her own father decades earlier. When Sarah became pregnant at 13, Martha acted as midwife. Asked how she felt about giving birth, Sarah showed a disturbing lack of understanding. "Dad said I was special because I gave the family a new, perfect member," she explained with devastating simplicity. Medical and psychological evaluations revealed the impact. Though 15 chronologically, Sarah's cognitive and emotional development was significantly delayed. She struggled with abstract concepts, had a limited vocabulary, and showed no awareness that what happened to her was wrong. If you are impacted by this story, you are not alone. Leave justice for Sarah in the comments to show we cannot tolerate children growing up in environments of exploitation and neglect. Your voice matters, these stories must not be forgotten. Meanwhile, the investigation into other family members uncovered more layers. Jacob and Thomas showed clear cognitive deficits, with intellectual development equivalent to children aged 9 or 10. Samuel and Rebecca also had significant developmental delays and health issues. Emma, Sarah, and Willard's daughter, was diagnosed with multiple conditions from consanguinity, heart problems, low immunity, and profound developmental delays. Doctors estimated she would never progress beyond the cognitive abilities of a 4- or 5-year-old. Martha Dawson eventually spoke to authorities, revealing her story mirrored Sarah's. Married to Willard at 15, she was told keeping bloodlines pure was essential. This thinking had deep roots. Dawson ancestors came from the Scottish Appalachians in the early 19th century, bringing beliefs about preserving family strains. Isolated in the Georgia mountains, these distorted beliefs not only survived but intensified. The most alarming find was diaries kept by Willard's grandfather from 1910 to 1935. Edwin Dawson detailed his disturbing views on family purity and instructions to continue the practice. The diaries included almost clinical notes on children born from these unions, which traits were considered successes or flaws. This proved the practice was a deliberate, generations-long system. Willard Dawson's trial began in March 1979, becoming one of Georgia's most notorious cases. Prosecutor Howard Reeves built a meticulous case with physical evidence, medical records, and devastating testimony. The Rabun County courtroom was packed with locals and journalists. Willard remained impassive throughout. His court-appointed lawyer argued cultural isolation and ignorance, but the prosecution countered that Willard had sufficient contact with the outside world to know his actions were condemned. The most powerful testimony came from Martha. After months of counseling, she broke her silence. "I knew it was wrong," she admitted through tears. "But when you're taught that questioning is betrayal, you lose the ability to oppose. I failed my daughter." Expert witnesses detailed the devastating effects of multi-generational consanguinity. Geneticist Dr. Lawrence Freeman presented a Dawson family tree showing how a restricted gene pool concentrated harmful recessive genes. "This is a textbook example of the dangers of endogamy," he explained. The problems in the older children, cognitive deficits, heart issues, malformations, were direct consequences. Emma's case represented extreme inbreeding depression, with over a 70% chance of severe developmental issues. Sarah's second fetus already showed multiple complications. As the trial unfolded, the community questioned how this could have gone undetected. School officials were criticized for not following up on absences, social services faced scrutiny for lack of visits. Prosecutor Reeves turned his closing argument to systemic failure. "This is not just the trial of one man. It is the trial of averted eyes, a system that failed the vulnerable, and a silence that allowed the unthinkable just miles from where we sit." After 7 days of trial and only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Willard guilty on all counts. Judge William Hartford imposed the maximum sentence, 3 consecutive 25-year prison terms, ensuring Willard would never be released. 45 years later, the Dawson case still reverberates, a reminder of the dangers of extreme isolation and community neglect. Willard Dawson died in prison in 1997 at 61, never expressing remorse. Martha served 5 years for complicity, then lived in assisted care until her death in 2012. The Dawson children's lives followed painful paths. Jacob and Thomas never lived independently, spending decades in care facilities. Thomas died in 2010, Jacob remains in supervised care. Samuel, 10 when the family was discovered, received specialized education and now lives in an assisted community, working in a carpentry workshop. Rebecca, the youngest, was adopted and thrived with support. Despite learning difficulties, she completed high school and now works as a library assistant. Sarah Dawson faced a long recovery. Her second child died before turning 1. After years of psychological treatment, she began to understand the magnitude of her suffering. At 19, she chose to speak publicly. "I don't want anyone else growing up thinking this was normal or acceptable," she said in a 1982 documentary. "Isolation isn't protection, it's a prison." Emma lived under specialized care, surpassing some expectations but never progressing beyond the cognition of a young child. She died at 25 in 2001 from congenital heart complications. Sarah eventually built a life. After therapy and remedial education, she married a teaching assistant she met in a rehabilitation program. They had no children, a conscious decision due to both trauma and genetic risks. Sarah dedicated her life to volunteering in programs that prevent family isolation and detect warning signs. The Dawson property was demolished and reforested, now part of a nature reserve. The case's true legacy was its impact on policy and awareness. Georgia overhauled child protection protocols, especially for remote areas. New laws required regular checks for homeschooled children and better truancy detection. Medical communities developed protocols to identify signs of improper relationships and genetic issues from consanguinity. Dawson medical records became case studies in genetics education worldwide. In 2008, a prevention and education center named Project Sarah opened in Atlanta, offering resources for survivors and training for professionals. Sarah Dawson died in 2019 at 56, leaving a legacy of courage. Her final wish was for her story to be told not as sensationalism, but as a painful reminder that extreme isolation can normalize the unthinkable. The Dawson story reminds us that even in society's deepest shadows, intervention and healing are possible. It underscores our collective responsibility to recognize when something is wrong, to not look away from discomfort, and to ensure no child grows up believing suffering is normal. If you're not subscribed, subscribe now for deep investigations into cases society prefers to forget, but we must remember to prevent their repetition. If you've watched this far, leave a comment saying "I watched here" so I can know who values these stories. Like this video and share it with those who believe in facing the truth, however difficult. This was the story of Willard Dawson, the most incestuous father ever exposed in Georgia, and the lives forever altered by generations of isolation and consanguinity. A story that reminds us no one, no matter how remote, should be beyond the reach of protection, education, and justice.